The biggest power generator in Africa, Eskom, has got one of the biggest bucket of problems. It is struggling to make ends meet. There's questions over its governance, and it is applying for yet another increase, which is likely not to be received well by business and consumers. Joining us now to shed some light on how the power producer will deal with these problems is Khulu Phasiwe, who is the utilities spokesperson. Khulu, thank you so much for joining us. Let's first start here. What shape has the new board found Eskom in?
Well, Eskom was in tatters in terms of its reputation and its finances. So they're starting essentially from ground zero. But things are beginning to shape up now. In January this year, when just before we released our annual results, the company was struggling to raise money because the market locally was very reluctant to do business with us. So Eskom needed at that time 20 billion rand to stay afloat. But we were struggling, and the JSE was also issuing notices that they're gonna delist our bonds if we do not release our results. So Eskom was essentially struggling. But now things are beginning to turn for the better. We now, as you correctly say, we have a new board, we have an interim CEO, and things are beginning to shape up. Instead of the 20 billion rand that we had required at the time, but because of the new management that we see now, we were able to more than double that amount. We are now sitting with the loans that we have gotten from the market of 43 billion rand. So things are beginning to change. Obviously, it's going to take a bit of time because all changes take a bit of time in terms of the processes, but at least we are heading into the right direction.
Eskom's primary energy cost, Khulu, grew from 18 billion rand rather in 2007 from 82 in the previous year. And we've seen now that Eskom is applying for yet another 66.6 billion in RCA. Take us through that.
Well, in the true sense of the word, we are not necessarily applying for a tariff increase, although ultimately it will have a bearing on the increase. What happens is that according to the regulations of the energy regulator, NERSA, at the end of every financial year, we as a company have to submit our annual reports to them so that they can gauge between the actuals and the projections. Because you remember that when they grant Eskom a tariff increase, they grant it on the basis of making projections as to what the cost will be in the future. So for us to submit the annual reports is basically for them to do what you can call a reconciliation, just to check between the actuals and the projections. So we as a company, over the last 4 years, we have not been able to claw back the money that we had spent. And now we are saying we would like to have that money back, which is 67 billion rand, as you correctly say. And that's why the regulator is now opening the public hearings so that members of the public can also have a say as to whether Eskom should get this money or how much of it we should get back. And just to contextualize this regulatory clearing account, it's like when someone sends you to buy bread and they give you 10 rand. When you get to the shop, the bread costs 12 rand. If you have extra 2 rand in your pocket, you buy that and then you can claim from the person who sent you. That's exactly what we are doing. We have spent our own money, 67 billion rand. We would like to have it back, and that's what we are doing now.
But Khulu, if this bid to get this money back through this process does not succeed, what are other steps that the utility will take in getting that money? Because we've seen that electricity supply has drastically declined between these years.
Well, first of all, we are hopeful that we will get or recover the money that we have spent, because the laws of the regulator are very clear and very simple. The regulator says if you have incurred any money over and above what we had allocated to you, all you need to do is just to prove as to why you had to spend that money, and then if the regulator agrees with you, you get your money back. So from our end, we do believe that we're going to get our money, and I'm sure the regulator will make pronouncements in June as to how much of it we are getting back. So from our end, quite frankly, we are quite positive that we're going to get our money back.
The issue of load shedding, as you've mentioned, has been raised a lot recently. Can you give us clarity on that? And also, the issue of this coal supply on Eskom is now becoming a very concerning issue. What is Eskom doing to deal with that, to make sure that it deals with that problem as soon as possible to avoid any further losses? And how is it going to affect the supply of electricity?
Well, very true. We do have challenges in 7 of our power stations. And maybe just to contextualize it, we have 15 coal-fired power stations. 8 of them are having enough coal supplies. There are no issues there. 7 of them, unfortunately, are having issues. 3 of the 7 are supplied by Tegeta, which is a Gupta-owned company, and they are having their own problems, the Guptas that is. And as a result, their mining operations are also affected, and they have declared an emergency or some kind of like a business rescue thing, which essentially will allow them to be put under rescue, business rescue, which is what is happening now. So from our end, essentially what we are doing now to make sure that we mitigate against the risk of load shedding and other things, we are diverting coal from the 8 other power stations that are having enough to the 7 so that we can keep the system running. In addition to that, we have also applied to the National Treasury for permission, not for money, for permission for us to issue tenders so that we can get a supplementary coal while these other companies like Tegeta are having their own problems, so that we can get coal in the interim so that we can keep the system running. And as you correctly mentioned before, we also have diesel as a backup to make sure that we keep the system running and avoid winter and avoid load shedding. From our end, we are no longer talking load shedding, quite frankly. As a matter of fact, I think it was the Irish poet Oscar Wilde who once said, we are all in the gutters, but some of us are looking at the stars. We as Eskom are not focusing on the problems, which is the gutters. We are looking at the stars, which is the solutions, and those solutions are on the table now, and we are hopeful and actually confident that we will be able to sail through this winter without the need to implement load shedding.